Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more epic tales every day. Liking this video helps us bring you more incredible stories, so smash that like button if you're ready for more. What would you do if you were in this situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Which part of this story surprised you the most? Share your reactions in the comments. I love reading what you think. If you could add one twist to this story, what would it be? Let's get creative in the comments. What do you think happens next in the human versus alien saga? Let's discuss your theories below. Yannick moved silently through the pristine hallways of the Escola Galactica, pushing his cart laden with cleaning supplies. The hum of students' conversations and the professors' debates filled the air, but none of it touched him. In their eyes he was invisible, a cleaner, a man whose life revolved around mopping floors, scrubbing windows, and polishing the grand institution. His hands worked methodically, his movements precise, as he wiped away smudges from the glass panels lining the corridor. Yet, beneath the quiet exterior, Yannick's mind was anything but simple. His thoughts raced with complexities beyond the reach of even the galaxy's finest intellectuals. His IQ surpassed 500, a level that should have placed him among the greatest minds in the universe. But Yannick had no desire for fame, for the spotlight, or for the burden that came with being recognized as extraordinary. He knew all too well what happened to those who were too brilliant for their own good. They became subjects of scrutiny, envy, and control. The Galactic Council ensured that no one, especially someone like Yannick, ever posed a threat to their carefully maintained order. For Yannick, his job at the Escola was a sanctuary. Here, he could hide in plain sight, performing tasks that no one questioned or noticed. The professors and students were far too absorbed in their intellectual pursuits to pay him any mind. It was exactly what he wanted: anonymity, freedom from the weight of expectations. He had learned long ago that drawing attention to his intelligence would only lead to trouble. It had happened before, and the consequences had been severe. His thoughts drifted as he polished the floor in a dimly lit corridor. He could still remember the first time he had accidentally let his genius slip. Years ago, on a different planet, in a different life, he had solved a complex equation in front of colleagues who had assumed he was merely there to observe. Their reactions had been a mix of awe and suspicion. Soon after, he'd found himself under the watchful eye of authorities, who had too many questions and far too much interest in his abilities. Since then, he had sworn to keep his brilliance hidden, to live a life that no one would notice. It wasn't easy, but it was safe. The Escola Galactica was the perfect place for someone like him, an institution dedicated to solving the universe's most complex mysteries, where minds far more public than his wrestled with equations that they didn't realize he had already mastered. He moved quietly among them, sweeping floors while they debated theories of quantum mechanics and the fabric of time, oblivious to the truth that he carried in his mind. The truth of the equation. The professors at the Escola were obsessed with one particular problem: the theory of everything. It was a single equation that could unite all branches of physics, linking time, space, and matter into one cohesive understanding of the universe. They had been chasing its solution for generations, without success. The galaxy's finest minds had devoted their entire careers to solving this riddle, but it remained elusive. Unbeknownst to them, Yannick had solved it years ago. It had come to him like any other thought, during one of his long shifts cleaning the classrooms late at night. The numbers, the symbols, they had arranged themselves effortlessly in his mind, falling into place like the pieces of a puzzle. He had scribbled the solution in the corner of a notebook, then quickly erased it, knowing even then that revealing the answer would change everything. So, he had kept it to himself, choosing to live in obscurity rather than disrupt the order of the galaxy. He could hear the sound of voices from one of the nearby lecture halls, professors deep in debate over yet another iteration of the equation they sought to solve. Yannick didn't bother to listen too closely. He knew what they were talking about. He had seen the equations written on the board many times before, had watched as they erased and rewrote the same symbols, chasing a solution that would forever elude them. Sometimes he wondered what it would be like to step into the room, to casually complete their work with a few strokes of chalk, and watch the realization dawn on their faces. But that was a fantasy he could never afford to indulge. He continued down the corridor, his mind wandering back to the life he had built here. It was a far cry from what it could have been, but it was peaceful. His job was simple. He blended in, invisible among the galaxy's brightest. No one suspected that the quiet man mopping the floors could have been the answer to the greatest scientific mystery of their time. And that was how Yannick liked it. But as he polished the floor in a darkened hallway, something broke through his thoughts, an unusual sound. It wasn't the usual hum of debate, or the quiet murmur of students discussing a paper. It was more frantic, urgent. Yannick paused, his hand stilling on the mop as he listened. The voices grew louder, more agitated. Curious, despite himself, Yannick moved toward the source of the commotion. The door to one of the advanced classrooms was slightly ajar, and through the crack, Yannick could see the figures inside. Professors, dressed in their pristine robes, gathered around a large chalkboard that spanned the length of the wall. The board was filled with equations, tangled and sprawling like the branches of an ancient tree. Even from where he stood, Yannick recognized the pattern immediately. It was the equation. The theory of everything. They were still at it, still trying to make the pieces fit. He could see their frustration in the way they gestured toward the board, hear it in the sharpness of their voices. They were close, so close, but not close enough. The final piece still eluded them, and without it, they were lost. Yannick watched for a moment longer, his grip tightening on the mop handle. It would be so easy to walk into the room and end their struggle. One simple solution, and they would be free of this burden. But he knew that wasn't an option. Solving the equation wouldn't just change the lives of the professors in that room, it would change the galaxy. And once the Galactic Council knew, Yannick would no longer be safe. He turned to leave, shaking off the temptation. His life was simple, and simplicity was what he needed. He could let them wrestle with the equation for a few more centuries if it meant keeping his quiet existence intact. But as he took his first step down the hall, a chill ran down his spine. A presence. Yannick turned, his heart racing, to find someone standing in the shadows. A tall figure, its eyes almond-shaped and unblinking, fixed on him with eerie calm. One of the alien professors, its yellow skin glowing faintly in the dim light, was watching him. "You've been observing," the alien said, its voice low, mechanical. Yannick's throat went dry. He gripped the mop tighter, unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to being noticed, least of all by someone like this. "I was just passing through," Yannick muttered, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. The alien tilted its head, studying him with an intensity that made Yannick's skin crawl. "You seem unconcerned," it said, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. The argument inside the classroom had reached a fever pitch. Voices clashed, overlapping one another, each trying to assert dominance in the debate. Yannick stood outside the door, unseen, just as he preferred. He didn't need to listen too carefully to know what was going on. The professors were at it again, grappling with the unsolvable problem. The infamous equation had consumed their lives, pulling them deeper into its labyrinth with no escape in sight. Their frustration was palpable. Yannick shifted on his feet, debating whether to leave. This wasn't his concern. He had his own work, his own life. But the tension in the room was magnetic, drawing him closer. He knew the equation they were arguing about. It was the same one they had been working on for decades, for generations even. Every time Yannick overheard them, it was the same story. Small advancements, minor revelations, but nothing close to a breakthrough. They were stuck, and they always would be. He let out a quiet breath, turning to walk away. His life had been carefully constructed around moments like this, avoiding situations that would require him to step out of his carefully crafted obscurity. But something rooted him in place. He stood in the dim hallway, unmoving, as their voices escalated. One of the professors threw a piece of chalk at the board in frustration, breaking the silence with a sharp crack. The equations sprawled across the wall mocked them, their complexity forming an insurmountable barrier. The finest minds in the galaxy, Yannick thought, and yet here they were, unable to make sense of a problem that he had solved long ago in the quiet of his own mind. He had wrestled with the same symbols, felt the same overwhelming complexity, until the answer had revealed itself to him in a moment of clarity. He didn't need to be here. He didn't need to intervene. But he couldn't shake the feeling. He had the answer. They would never stop, would never find peace with their work until the equation was solved. And all it would take was a few strokes of chalk, a few minutes of his time. A part of him felt pity for them, watching as they tried and failed, over and over, caught in the web of their own brilliance. But another part of him, perhaps the part he had spent years burying, wanted to show them what he could do. What he had already done. No, he thought. Not this time. This isn't your problem. Walk away. But his feet didn't move. Yannick swallowed hard, torn between the safety of his anonymity and the pull of his mind. His heart raced. If he stepped into that room, there would be no going back. They would see him, truly see him, for what he was. The sanctuary he had built would crumble, and everything would change. He started to turn away when he felt it again, that presence. The same one from earlier. He looked up and saw the tall, alien professor standing at the end of the hallway, watching him. Those large, unblinking eyes were fixed on him with eerie calm. It wasn't the first time Yannick had seen this professor, but he had never spoken to them. Yet, something in their gaze told him that they knew. "You've been watching them struggle," the alien said, its voice soft but unwavering. Yannick didn't respond immediately. He wasn't used to being spoken to, let alone noticed. And certainly not in moments like this. He tried to brush off the unease building in his chest, but the professor's stare was unwavering. "I've been watching you," the professor continued. "You're different." Yannick tightened his grip on the mop handle, unsure of how to respond. His first instinct was to deny it, to insist that he was just a janitor, a cleaner. But the words wouldn't come. The alien didn't need to hear them anyway. They already knew. "You could help them," the professor said, tilting their heads slightly as if contemplating the impact of their own words. "But you choose not to. Why? Why?" Yannick had asked himself that question many times before. Why did he hide? Why did he keep his genius a secret, while others chased the same answers he had already found? The answer had always been simple: safety. "I'm just passing through," Yannick muttered, the words sounding hollow in his own ears. But the alien remained unmoved, their expression unreadable. "You've already solved it," the professor said, not a question but a statement. Yannick's pulse quickened. They knew. Of course they did. His secret wasn't as hidden as he thought, not to someone who had been watching closely enough. He felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't felt in years. Yet, despite that, the pull of the equation was still there, stronger now than ever. "They won't solve it without you," the professor said. "No one can." Yannick looked past the alien to the classroom, the frustrated voices now a low hum through the door. His mind raced, weighing the risks against the undeniable truth that gnawed at him. He could fix it. He could end this debate, end their struggle. But the cost, was it worth it? The alien's gaze never wavered, though their words seemed softer now. "You were meant for more than this." The choice was his, and it always had been. He knew the moment was inevitable. Sooner or later, he would be found out. He could feel the weight of his own decision pressing down on him. This was his moment of reckoning. Without fully realizing it, Yannick found himself stepping toward the classroom door. His heart raced, his mind already turning over the equation in his head, calculating, solving. The steps felt heavier with each one, but he didn't stop. The alien remained silent, watching as Yannick moved closer. As he stepped into the room, the professors fell silent, their arguments dying on their lips. They turned, wide-eyed, as Yannick walked past them, their expressions frozen in disbelief. No one spoke as he approached the chalkboard. The equations sprawled across it in a mess of tangled ideas, years of frustration and half-formed solutions staring back at him. Yannick felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, but his mind was already racing ahead, piecing together the solution that had eluded them for so long. His hand moved before he even realized it, picking up a piece of chalk from the tray. He began writing. The professors watched in stunned silence as Yannick's hand moved across the board, filling in gaps, correcting assumptions, erasing the errors that had been accepted as fact for far too long. Line after line, the equation unfolded before him, a dance of numbers and symbols that made perfect sense in his mind. The room was still, the air thick with disbelief. No one dared interrupt him as he worked, the chalkboard slowly transforming under his touch. Years of debate, centuries of failed attempts, wiped away in minutes as the solution came to life before their eyes. Yannick stepped back, the piece of chalk slipping from his fingers and hitting the floor with a soft clatter. It was done. The equation, the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe, stood complete, right there in front of them. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The professors, the finest minds in the galaxy, stood frozen, their expressions a mix of awe, confusion, and perhaps a touch of fear. Yannick didn't wait for them to react. He turned on his heel, walking past them without a word, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached the door, he glanced back at the alien professor, who nodded slightly, their eyes gleaming with something Yannick couldn't quite place. He stepped out of the room, leaving behind the astonished professors and the equation that would change the course of galactic history forever. The silence that followed Yannick's departure from the classroom was thick with disbelief. The professors remained frozen, staring at the completed equation on the board, their expressions shifting between awe and fear. Some had dedicated their entire careers to this equation, chasing a solution that had remained out of reach for centuries. Now, in the span of a few minutes, a man they had never considered anything more than a janitor had solved it. The truth was impossible to ignore, but that didn't make it easier to accept. As Yannick walked down the corridor, he could feel the weight of their stares even from a distance. His mind was racing, faster than it had in years. He had done the one thing he had sworn never to do. He had exposed himself. The quiet life he had meticulously crafted was over. He had drawn attention, and now, there was no turning back. He regretted it almost instantly. The rush of solving the equation, of finally using his mind in a way that mattered, was already fading. What remained was the sinking realization that his sanctuary had been shattered. He could already feel the shifting eyes, the whispers that would start circulating through the Escola in the hours to come. His anonymity, the very thing that had protected him for so long, was gone. Yannick's thoughts churned as he made his way back to his small quarters. He had always known that his intellect would one day betray him, that there would come a moment when he couldn't hide anymore. But he had always imagined it happening far in the future, not like this, not today. The professors wouldn't keep quiet. They would talk. Word would spread, and soon, the wrong people would hear about what had happened. And the Galactic Council would come. The Council had always been a shadow over his life, the unspoken reason why he had hidden his abilities in the first place. They were powerful, an authoritarian body that controlled much of the galaxy's intellectual elite. They didn't take kindly to outliers, to those who threatened the established order. Yannick had spent years blending into the background to avoid their notice. Now, all that effort had been undone. He could feel it already. The Council would want to know how he, a mere janitor, had solved the unsolvable. They would want to study him, understand him, and most likely control him. People like him weren't free to live quiet lives. They were too dangerous, too unpredictable. The Council would either coerce him into joining their ranks, or they would imprison him, ensuring that his genius never threatened their grip on power. Yannick's heart raced as he considered the implications. He was already formulating plans, running through scenarios in his head, but each one led to the same conclusion. There was no way out. The Council had eyes and ears everywhere. Once they heard about what he had done, they would find him. And when they did, his life as he knew it would be over. He tried to calm himself, pushing the panic down, but the fear kept bubbling to the surface. There was nowhere to hide, no one to turn to. His solitude had been his shield for so long, but now it was his greatest weakness. He had no allies, no network of support. Even Vesk, his gruff but well-meaning supervisor, would be of no help. Vesk had always treated Yannick like a friend, or as close to one as a man like him could have, but that wouldn't stop the council from taking Yannick if they wanted to. The weight of it all pressed down on him, suffocating. His quiet life, the simplicity he had cherished, was slipping away, and in its place was a cold, uncertain future. As he reached the door to his quarters, Yannick hesitated, feeling the paranoia creeping in. Every sound seemed louder, every footstep echoing through the halls seemed to be drawing closer to him. He could feel the walls closing in, as though the Escola itself was turning on him. Before he could enter, a voice startled him from behind. "I warned you." Yannick turned quickly, his pulse spiking. The alien professor stood there, the one who had spoken to him before, the one who had known more than they should. Their almond-shaped eyes were still and unreadable, but their tone carried a weight of certainty. "They'll come for you now," the alien said. "It's only a matter of time." Yannick swallowed hard, not needing to ask who they were. The Galactic Council. Of course. He had known this, but hearing it aloud made the reality all the more tangible, all the more terrifying. "What do I do?" Yannick asked, though he already knew there was no easy answer. The aliens stepped closer, their voice lowering to a near whisper. "You have two choices. You can hide, though it won't keep you safe for long. The Council has ways of finding those they want." There was a pause, and then the alien continued. "Or you can flee. There's a way out, a secret transportation network built into the school. It's not on any official record. If you leave now, you might have a chance." Yannick felt a flicker of hope at the mention of the network. An escape route. But fleeing wasn't a true solution. It would only delay the inevitable. The Council's reach extended far beyond the Escola, far beyond this planet. He could disappear for a time, but eventually, they would track him down. They always did. "Why are you helping me?" Yannick asked, wary of the professor's motivations. They had known too much about him, had seen through his facade when no one else had. The alien tilted their heads slightly, considering the question. "Because you're different. Your mind is unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. The Council wants to control that, but I believe you deserve to be free. But freedom comes with a price." Yannick's mind raced, calculating the odds. He could run, buy himself time, maybe even disappear long enough to figure out a permanent solution. But deep down, he knew that running wasn't the answer. It never was. The Council would come for him, whether it was tomorrow or years from now. His internal conflict tore at him. He had lived his entire life hiding, blending in, staying under the radar. Was he really prepared to flee now, to leave everything behind? The alien seemed to sense his hesitation. "Whatever you choose, you must decide soon. The Council won't wait." Yannick's thoughts spiraled. His whole life had been about avoiding this exact moment, and now it was here, crashing down on him with a force he hadn't been prepared for. The simplicity he had fought so hard to maintain was gone. And now, he was standing on the edge of something far more dangerous. The fear clawed at him, but there was another feeling creeping in as well, a strange sense of clarity. He had spent so long running from his own mind, from the consequences of being what he was. And now, no matter how much he wanted to, there was no running left to do. He could feel the walls of the Escola closing in on him, the inevitability of the Council's arrival looming large. His every instinct screamed at him to flee, to disappear before they could reach him. But there was nowhere to go. No matter how far he ran, he would always be found. Yannick took a deep breath, his mind racing through the possibilities, weighing his options. He was out of time. The choice was his, and his alone. The air had changed. Yannick could feel it the moment he stepped out of his quarters. The usual quiet hum of the Escola Galactica had been replaced by something more oppressive. The Council had arrived. He didn't need to see them to know. Their presence was like a shadow creeping through the halls, moving silently, relentlessly, towards him. He walked, his mind sharper than ever, calculating his next move. He couldn't run. There was no point in fleeing now. The Council had eyes everywhere, and wherever he went, they would find him. And yet, in that clarity, A strange sense of calm had settled over him. He had spent years hiding from this moment, but now, it had come, and he wasn't afraid. The council's agents moved with purpose. He could sense their approach in the way the students and professors hurried away from certain areas, their conversations hushed, glances exchanged with nervous anticipation. The agents didn't need to be seen, their reputation alone was enough to sow fear. They were the galaxy's enforcers of intellectual order, and they didn't tolerate disruption. Yannick wasn't just a disruption, he was a threat. He had no illusions about what the council wanted. They didn't care about his well-being or the magnitude of the equation he'd solved. They wanted control. And now that they knew what he was capable of, they wouldn't rest until they had it. Whether through coercion, manipulation, or force, they would stop at nothing to bend his mind to their will. The equation he had solved was more than just numbers and symbols to them, it was power. The kind of power that could reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. But they didn't know everything. Yannick's mind had been working in overdrive ever since he'd left the classroom. The equation had seemed like a simple solution, an intellectual curiosity. But as he reflected on its true implications, he began to see something deeper. The equation was more than just a unifying theory. It held the potential to unlock forces that were beyond anything the Council, or anyone else, could comprehend. It wasn't just a tool for understanding the universe. It could be weaponized, manipulated to control the very essence of reality. And there was a flaw in it. A flaw that only he knew. Yannick had seen it almost immediately after solving the equation, a subtle imperfection buried deep within its structure. It was the kind of thing that would be overlooked by even the most brilliant minds. It hadn't meant much to him at first, but now, as the council closed in, it became his key. He could outsmart them. He could turn their desire for power into their downfall. He wasn't going to run. He was going to change the equation. As he moved through the corridors, he saw her waiting, Dr. Covell. She stood there with an unsettling calm, her sharp eyes watching his every move. The tension between them was palpable. She had been there when he solved the equation, her curiosity barely masking her underlying ambition. Yannick had trusted her, or at least, he hadn't considered her a threat. But now, with the council breathing down his neck, he could see it. She was one of them. "You're not going to escape this," Covell said, her voice low and measured, as though she already knew how this would end. "I'm not running," Yannick replied, his tone equally calm. "But I know you've been working with the council. I know what you want." Covell's expression didn't change. "What I want is to ensure the future. You've done something incredible, Yannick. But the equation, it's not just a solution. It's power. And power needs control. Without the council, that power could destroy everything." Yannick stepped closer, his mind already racing ahead. "It's not control you want. It's obedience. You want the equation to bend reality to your will, and you're using the council to get it. But you don't understand it, not fully." Covell's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty passing through her otherwise composed demeanor. "What are you talking about?" "The equation isn't just a unifying theory," Yannick explained, his voice growing firmer. "It can manipulate the laws of the universe, reshape them. But there's a flaw. Something that even you and the council haven't noticed." Covell took a step back, clearly unnerved by the confidence in his voice. "You're lying." "I'm not," Yannick said simply. "I've already rewritten part of it. And now, it's useless to you and to the council." Her expression hardened. "You don't know what you've done. The council will take you, whether you want it or not. They'll pull the knowledge from your mind if they have to. Maybe," Yannick admitted, his calm unsettling. "But they won't get what they came for." Covell's facade of control was slipping. She moved toward him, her voice filled with desperation now. "You can't stop this, Yannick. This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us." But Yannick was done listening. He had already made his choice. He had altered the equation, hidden the truth deep within the numbers where no one would ever find it. The council could try to use it, but it would never work. The power they sought was gone, buried in the flaw that only he could see. Footsteps echoed through the halls. The council's agents were closing in. Covell's expression shifted, panic setting in as the realization dawned that she had lost control. She stepped back, her confidence crumbling in the face of Yannick's quiet resolve. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You think you've won?" Yannick didn't flinch. "It's over for me. I've done what I needed to do." The sound of the agents grew louder, their approach unmistakable. But Yannick wasn't afraid. He had outsmarted them all. The equation they wanted, the power they craved, it was gone. They could imprison him, study him, try to force the knowledge from him, but it wouldn't matter. The key to the equation's true potential was lost to them. The agents appeared at the end of the corridor, their movements cold and efficient as they closed in on Yannick. Covell stood frozen, caught between her ambition and her failure. The weight of the moment pressed down on them both, but Yannick was free in a way either she nor the council could understand. Without a word, the agents surrounded him, but Yannick's mind was already elsewhere. He had won, not by escaping, but by outthinking them all. The future he had feared, the one where his genius was used as a tool of control, was no longer a threat. He had taken that power away from them. As the agents led him away, Yannick felt a strange peace settle over him. His quiet life as a janitor was gone, but so was the galaxy's control over him. He had become something more than they could ever understand. And in the end, he had won the only way he could, by outsmarting the universe. Yannick disappeared into the halls of the Escola Galactica, leaving behind a legacy not of equations or solutions, but of freedom.